meantime, we'll go ahead and get started. Robin, are you about ready?
I am.
Okay. All right, y'all. So thanks so much for joining us today. So we hope you'll get some good information out of this session and are looking forward to hearing from some of our excellent panelists in a little bit. But to kick us off, my name is Rachael Rysz, and I'm the Assistant Director of Career Services for the College of Arts and Sciences. In my role, I do help students to find opportunities such as internships, assist them in finding their career pathway, post-grad, and all of the good stuff in between: resume, cover letter writing, all that good stuff. And today we've tailored to a topic that I'm especially fond of, as I was a former psychology major and my master's is in counseling psychology. So this is a topic that I'm very familiar with, of searching for opportunities within the field of psychology. And I'll let my colleague Robin go ahead and introduce herself and kick us off with some tidbits about internships, all of that good stuff before we dive in.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. So as Rachel mentioned, I'm Robin Kazmarek, and I'm excited to be here and be working with many of you. Several of your names, as I'm scrolling through the participant list, look familiar, so I'm sure that we have exchanged emails or something over my year here at Elon. I am somewhat new, sort of. I started in January of 2020, and I serve as the Director of Internships for the College of Arts and Sciences. So my main focus area is helping students not only register their internship for academic credit or ELR units, but also helping you in that search process, helping you prepare, whether that be your resume or just trying to figure out, how do I even begin thinking about what I want to do in this area? So I am excited to be a part of this esteemed panel today, and I must also apologize and beg your forgiveness ahead of time. I am working from home, and about 30 minutes ago, my dog decided it is playtime. So he has been running around the house. He's been squeaking toys and barking. I have done everything I possibly can to keep him occupied for the next 2 hours. But if you hear my dog bark, I do apologize, and I thank you for your patience with that. So if we can go ahead and, Rachel, am I able to advance the slides or? Perfect. Okay. So my role here today is to sort of talk with you about internships kind of from a logistics perspective, so that if you aren't very familiar with internships or have never considered working through the university for academic credit, I wanted to be able to give you some of those ins and outs as you begin to think about that and prepare. So one of the first questions we often get is, kind of what is an internship? How is an internship different than me volunteering, 1 or 2 days a week at a clinic or maybe in a private practice or something? So really the big difference is an internship, as it says here, it's an experiential learning opportunity that integrates knowledge and theory that you're learning in the classroom. So think about this as sort of that theory into practice, where you are in the classroom, you're learning about the academic side of your field, but then you're taking that to a professional setting and putting that into practice. So you're getting that hands-on experience. You'll be working with a professional who is in that field. So that's another key piece of an internship, is that your site supervisor needs to be somebody with experience in the field, because they can help enrich that opportunity for you and help you to tie what you're learning in your internship back to what you're studying in your courses, and then vice versa. It's also a really great opportunity where you will be getting some feedback. So we hope that your site supervisor is going to be formally and informally providing you some development, some mentoring, some direct feedback on your performance, your skills. And sometimes that can be tough. It's hard to hear if maybe you're missing the mark on things, but it's a wonderful way in a controlled environment to really grow those skills and be more prepared for that next step after college. So we can move on. Yes. So internships are so incredibly valuable. And this by no means is a complete list of the value that you will gain from an internship. But some of the main areas, as I'd mentioned, you do gain that valuable work experience because you really are out in the working world, in an environment, in a professional setting. So you get that opportunity to really see what it's like. and to gauge if this is the right path for you. And many times students come to us and they are just thrilled because this has solidified where they want to go. They've realized this is the right fit for me. For some of you, you may go and realize this isn't quite the right path. But what a great opportunity to do that in an internship, because working with people like myself and Rachel, your faculty members, that professional supervisor that you may have been working with, we can help to kind of take what you're learning and refocus and guide you into a different path that maybe is more of a right fit for you. We also can, it can give you an edge in the job market. So as I was saying, you're really learning those hands-on skills. You'll see a little bit further down the bullet point list, it also talks about networking with professionals. So by being in the field, you are gaining all of that, and networking is a very critical piece right now, especially with COVID. As I'm sure you've all learned that a lot of things aren't necessarily in person anymore. And so having that network of professionals to lean on and turn to is very, very helpful right now. Some of you may also be fortunate enough to find an internship where you can receive financial compensation. And that is something that we support and we encourage. It is possible for students to receive financial pay as well as academic credit. That's a question I get often, where sometimes students think I have to choose one or the other, and you definitely do not. You can have kind of the best of both worlds and be earning pay as well as earning that financial credit, as well as earning that academic credit. And then the last two pieces, you're going to gain confidence, which is going to help you transition into that life after Elon, that full-time job, that graduate school program, whatever that may be. And think about anything you've done throughout your life, whether it was learning to play an instrument, joining a sports team, selecting your major, whatever it was. The more you did that and the more exposure you gained, you started to see yourself grow. You started to feel that success behind you, which built your confidence. And that's exactly what your internship experience can do, which then can help launch you into that life after Elon, that grad program, job, whatever that may be for you. So within the College of Arts and Sciences, there are some definite requirements that are expected for an internship. And I am here to help you work through all of these. If you've got questions, your faculty members can work with you on all of this. So I want to put this out, but certainly don't feel as if you need to commit this to memory. We are here to help you with all of this. One of the first pieces for a student in the College of Arts and Sciences, if you are doing an academic internship, which means you are registering for an internship class where you will earn academic credit, you need to have a faculty mentor who is in your department. So this person most likely will be someone other than your faculty advisor. Your advisor is the individual who is helping you plan your career path, helping you plan your academic path, helping you select classes. So your mentor for your internship, think of that as the individual who is your course instructor for your internship. This individual is someone who is trained in the field, who has expertise in that area, and can also be a key player in that theory to practice that I was talking about earlier. So your faculty mentor would be the person who is also giving you your course assignments, who is assessing you and grading you on those. And then at the ultimate end of your experience, the individual who will be awarding you your credit and your grade for that course. Your internships do need to be approved. So your faculty mentor, myself, the dean of your college, your department chair, all of us will be looking at this information, not to nitpick anything, but we want to ensure that your experience is really meeting the goals and the expectations of what we have for an internship. So just know that there will be some people that can help you plan out what that looks like, and then also will be putting those checks and balances in place along the way. You will have a syllabus just like you do for any other course, and you will get that from your faculty mentor. This again helps to lay out what are the expectations and what are the assignments that you will be required to complete. For academic credit in the College of Arts and Sciences, Any student doing an internship must complete a minimum of 40 hours of work. So you can complete that over the course of, let's say, this spring semester. So it doesn't have to be done in 1 week. In fact, we don't encourage that by any means, because we want this to be an ongoing experience where you are growing and developing. So you need some time in order to do that. It is possible for you to earn more than 1 academic credit, and that would require an additional 40 hours in stages. So for example, if you wanted to earn 2 academic credits, you would need a minimum of 80 hours of work and then on up. Typically, we don't see things over 4 credits because that's 160 hours. And so once we start to tip past that, it really becomes something where we've got to make sure that you can balance all of the hours, especially if you're taking another course or anything along with your internship. Internships can also be used to earn your ELR units. So as you know, you have to have 2 of those to graduate, and you can use an internship in order to meet that ELR requirement. If you register an internship for academic credit, you will automatically earn ELR credit as well. So it's sort of that 2-for-1 approach. So talking about some internship supervisor pieces, this individual cannot be a relative or friend. You need to have somebody who is outside of your immediate circle just to ensure that there are fair practices in place and that you are getting the best feedback, mentor, and guidance that you can get. So on a very, very rare occasion, do we have a student say, yo, my father is, XYZ, and I'm going to work for his company. We can still work with you in that scenario. You may be working at your father's company. You just cannot report to your father. So know that that is a possibility. One piece we get a lot of questions about, especially right now with COVID, the university does not allow retroactive credit for any type of internship or course experience. So what that means is if you completed an internship this past fall semester and you did not register it for academic credit, you cannot come to me now and say, I would like to use this experience to earn academic credit. You have to be working the hours concurrently with the time you're enrolled in the course. So I like to get that out early because I know, especially as you are continuing to plan out the next several semesters at Elon, it's a good piece of information to have. And the last piece is not all majors and casts require an internship. So for psychology, for example, you are not required to do an internship as part of your graduation. Many, many psychology students do complete internships. So there are ways that we can still work with you so that you can gain academic credit and that experience, but know that within psychology, it's not a requirement. I know that can be terribly confusing for our CAS majors because if you talk to your friend or your roommate who is in a major that requires an internship, that can cause some confusion. So I wanted to put your mind at ease that it's not required, but we certainly encourage it for that professional and personal development.
And one thing I'd like to add in here too is, if you've done an internship in the past and you had not registered it for academic credit, don't worry. You can still count that internship on your resume. That experience still counts for something, absolutely. It's just not going to be the same weight or count for an ELR like it would if you're doing it for academic credit.
Great point, yes.
Okay, so when we're thinking about searching for internship opportunities, so just a few kind of quick tips here, and let me check in first before we dive into kind of exploring the how or exploring the where. What questions do you all or might you all have for Robin? Anything logistically that's not making sense or that is making sense but needs a little bit of clarification?
And I'll be here for the whole presentation as well. So if you think of something, feel free to throw it in the chat box and I can respond that way also.
Yeah, don't be afraid to use the raise hand feature or the chat box. We'll definitely flag it down. We've got some folks on here that can help in that regard as well. So, I mean, the first step too is just knowing your experiences and your skills. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about what are some of those transferable skills in just a minute. But I did want to just draw your attention to the fact that all of our appointments this semester and past semester, we're planning on continuing to do totally virtual in terms of our appointments, and you're able to schedule using your Elon Job Network profile. My hope is that everybody on this call knows what that is, but if you don't, I have it linked here in this presentation. But the Elon Job Network is going to be that great one-stop shop to do some blanket searches, to search for internship or job opportunities, and also to schedule those appointments or to schedule a drop-in appointment, which are kind of quicker, just needing a question to be answered type appointments. So just some, quick tips about us and our resources here. But I want to dive into kind of some more specifics about searching for a psychology specific opportunity. And this is just a screenshot of EJN. So some resources that I've found in my work with students, and also, with my background of being somebody in the field, right? And, as part of my graduate program, I had many internships ranging from a psychiatric hospital to an outpatient center to working with folks in a community prison or the county prison. So varied experiences, right? And so I'm familiar with a few different pathways that psychology majors take. So I just wanted to point your attention to a couple different resources that we have that I think have been helpful and will be helpful for you specifically as a psychology major. So the first resource is quite literally called "What Can I Do with This Major?" And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you where you'll find that resource on our website. So this is a resource that Elon technically pays for, that you have access to. So I would definitely encourage you to be utilizing that resource. And let me just go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll share this on my other screen. Okay, so the page is going to look just like this. And again, you can access this from our website. If you copy the link for whatever reason, it does not like to work. So I think it's because we specifically pay for the hosting or pay for the cookies of the site. But once you're on this page, you'll see that a lot of the majors and minors on here align pretty well to Elon's majors and minors. So I'm just going to go ahead and scroll down and click on psychology. And once we're here, or let me actually go back because it's not. Okay, let's see if this will work. So under resources, and then if we go to major and career exploration and planning, and the link is the "What Can I Do with This Major?" link. Again, so just seeing if this will, for whatever reason, it might be down. Don't know, we'll give it another try. So if we go ahead and click on psychology, it'll take us to this landing page where you can see the breakdown. So when we think about major, right, we think of all of the possibilities, all of the different outcomes. What this website, I think, does a really nice job of is synthesizing the information by outcome, right? Thinking about those different industry areas. For example, we all, the professionals on the call, work in higher education, right? You might be working in healthcare, or you might be working in education, right? Those are two different examples of industries. And I think what this website does a really nice job of is explore a lot of the really, really relevant ones to your major. So we can see the first one that we see here is sort of human services or social services. And we can see the different outcomes or placements where these people work. So I think it breaks it down in a pretty digestible way, and even gives you some strategies and resources to obtain an internship or to obtain an opportunity in that particular area. So as we scroll, we can see here, again, some of the most common ones. And this does not have every single pathway, but I think it does do a good job of covering the most common, most linear, if you will. But again, just being mindful that each pathway is different and that there will be many different outcomes. But just think that this is a really good starting point if you're thinking about exploring what are all of the possibilities that you can do with this major. So I'm just going to scroll down just so you can kind of get a sense. And at the bottom, I think it also does a really nice job of breaking down graduate degrees, right? And telling you, okay, these are the ones you might need a master's for. These are the ones that you might need, higher level. And we're not going to spend a ton of time there. I want to focus more on internship, kind of this level searching. But one thing I do like that I wanted to show as well is at the bottom, they also link professional associations, which these are organizations who tend to have a lot of great resources for students, including scholarship information, including information into your next step, right? If you're thinking about graduate school or funding, and then additionally, some websites that are more helpful than probably Indeed or Google when you're searching for opportunities. So I hope that this information is helpful for you all. So in the next resource, I'm going to go ahead and share, and again, you can access that right from the SPDC landing page on Elon's website. Next resource I'm going to show you is actually the Elon Job Network. So then if you have any questions regarding EJN, this way, hopefully those will be answered. So let me just go ahead and share this. Okay, so on this landing page, and again, this is where you would go to schedule an appointment. We have started to link some of those different job boards, as I mentioned, ones that might be a little bit more specific or a little bit more helpful than Indeed or Google for your search. We've started to link those by outcome or by cluster. So thinking about, again, what are those most common pathways? Might not everybody be going down that pathway, but a majority, we see a decent number of students going down a certain pathway. So if we scroll down to this job and career resources and then select industry specific job boards, you'll see it's taking us to a different landing page with 150 different links. And these links, again, are either going to be for a job board or a resource page that can be helpful. So I'm just going to go ahead and select nonprofit human services and government, and pre-health and healthcare. Those are two of the most common industry clusters that we see psychology majors going into. And I'm going to go ahead and select apply. And we can see already the second link here is something that's really specific for psychology majors. So keep scrolling down. Just wanted to show you kind of the plethora of resources that are available on here that many students don't know this section exists on our website, and this can be a valuable resource for you. Again, there's a few pages here, so definitely worth your while to explore. I'm not going to take a ton of time to click on each individual link because I want to make sure we have time for questions and to get to, the fun keyword searching next. But these are just some of the links here. Any questions on these resources, these links, how to navigate the system for the students that are on the call? Okay. So far, so good. Okay. So let me go ahead and stop sharing there. And one thing I do want to share is just a tip, from my work, again, with psychology majors and thinking outside the box. Often I think we can get overwhelmed with thinking about, the amount of places, especially with a major like psychology, where there are so many different pathways. It can be a bit overwhelming thinking about all of those possibilities. So one thing we do recommend right off the bat are doing informational interviews or trying to kind of figure out which of those pathways might be best for you. So scheduling, let's say, a 30-minute phone call with somebody in a field that you're doing research on could be a great way to weed out something that you think you might like, but then find out that you don't, without having to waste your time doing a full internship opportunity in that particular area. But I think, again, just kind of Googling can be a little bit overwhelming. So something that I found that's really helpful is to start by looking at what resources are in your local community, in your county, or in the area in which you're seeking to intern. So something that's really helpful is the Department of Human Services, or your county specific department, tends to have all of those links in one place, especially for social services, human services, youth and child services, right, which are common areas that we see folks want to explore. So I'm just going to share an example just from our local, right down the road, Guilford County. And this is something that I use in my work when I'm trying to show students what are all of the organizations that are available out there, right? Because I think sometimes having one place or one landing page, even if it doesn't mean, yes, every single organization has an internship opportunity, it can be a really helpful starting point. So you can see this is sort of youth services, just as an example, resource guide for Guilford County. And if we scroll down, we can see these different organizations broken down with a description, with a phone number, with a website, and by area. This is but one way you can go about making this search a little less daunting as a psychology major, is just by looking for a county specific resource or guide that can often be found through the department's website or through the county's website. So typically these services are kind of all enmeshed, and this is just one example, but I wanted to show you how you can go about doing this, because I think looking at organizations too of interest can be a really helpful starting point. We can see this is pretty vast, so I'm not going to, go through all, but we see here counseling, mental and behavioral health. And again, don't take it as if there's not an internship posted, they might not have one. It's worth your while to explore their website and see what they do. Getting a sense for these organizations is your biggest step, is your biggest key, I think, in the field. Is this helpful? Those of you who can see me and are sharing your camera? I hope so. Okay, awesome. All right. So just kind of carrying on, and again, these will all be linked on this PowerPoint. This session is being recorded, so I should have access to all of the participants on here, so I should be able to send this out to everybody. So if there are questions, please ask those throughout, but just also know that these resources are linked on here and should be available for you. So we talked through some location-based searches. We talked through using the two resources that are available through our office, through the EJN, and then the what can I do with this major link. So now I want to shift gears and talk just a little bit about transferable skills, right? So you probably have heard this before, this term of like, oh, what do I have that, from my resume, or what can I put it on my resume, that might be applicable? Well, we want to I think first about your audience, right? What is your audience deeming as, the most valuable skill or top skills that they want? And, what's kind of nice is most industries are looking for the same thing. If you look at, let's say, the top 6 skills on here: leadership, communication, analytical or quantitative, strong work ethic, ability to work on a team, and problem solving, usually 9 times out of 10, year after year, we're finding through the National Association of Colleges and Employers that these are the skills that employers across industry are looking for. So chances are you've probably gained some of these. If you haven't had a work experience or an internship in the past, you may have gained these through being part of an organization on campus, through a leadership opportunity, maybe even through doing research on campus, right? So these are skills that you can gain across industry and that are great to spotlight, that most employers are looking for, especially in the field of psychology, right? The broader ranging field of psychology. So just wanted to kind of show this, and hopefully this is validating for you all, right? Because sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming or feel like we don't have, what somebody's looking for, but I promise you, you probably do, just in a slightly different way. And I think too, this was helpful for me when I was in graduate school and even before graduate school, thinking about, it's one thing to look at that huge daunting list that I showed first, but then it's another to think about what are these common titles, what are some common keywords or common industries. Again, with psychology, I think the beauty of it is it's so broad ranging, but also that can be the thing that's most stressful, right? Is thinking about the industry that you enter into might not be as linear as what you see a classmate in the School of Communications or the School of Business, enter into. But I personally think that's the beauty of it, that you have more options, right? So thinking about the different sectors or different industries that you can enter into, so broad ranging, so many options, right? And then if you look at the other side, the column here, just some sample titles or sample roles to kind of get you thinking outside the box. And these are, again, not all, but just wanted to give a few that could be helpful in your search as you're going about doing plopping in a keyword search. Maybe you're still using Indeed or Google, but think about using some tailored kind of job descriptions or job titles like these, and that can produce your result tenfold, as opposed to just typing in psychology internship, right? Like you might get more of a result when you do something like this. Any
Rachel,
questions?
can I ask a question? So
Sure.
I often tell students that if they don't need a paid internship, they don't really need to find something that's called an internship, right? They could contact an organization and ask if they could come and work with them. Do you agree that that's a legitimate strategy?
So what students I think will find is that a lot of opportunities, especially in the field of psychology, are unpaid, which is unfortunate. But that's not to say, like the resource that I shared earlier with, looking at county specific information, that's a great way to get a feel for what resources are out there for our community members and to see where I might start even volunteering, right? Because that can get a skill on your resume. So yes, in a roundabout way to answer your question, I think that that's a great way to show somebody that you're interested too, and show somebody that you're invested in doing that work, right? Yeah, great question.
Rachel, can I jump in with one more point on that?
Please, yes.
I think also it's a wonderful way to build that network because you are making those connections, and you may have heard the phrase, it's easier to find a job when you have a job. And a lot of that is simply because you're connected with professionals in your field of interest. So being able to have those professionals who can speak to your skill set, who can speak to your work ethic, who can be that voice of support for you when you are exploring that next step is so helpful. And it doesn't matter if you were doing that experience as an internship, a volunteer opportunity, those individuals are still creditable individuals in your field. So I would wholeheartedly support you doing any type of opportunity.
Yes, any exploration is good exploration. And even especially what I was saying earlier, sometimes finding the thing that you don't want to do can be the most valuable, right? It happened to me when I was in graduate school, my first placement. I realized, okay, this wasn't for me, but I gained some really great skills from it, and I don't regret it. So just one more kind of quick thing that I want to, give some attention to before we turn it over. I think we've got most of our panelists on the call, so I'm excited to hear from them. But just a few kind of tidbits, again, just from my own experience being in the field and my experience working with students, who are psychology majors or interested in entering into the field. So one of the most common questions, and I'm surprised I haven't gotten this question yet in this group, but a lot of folks are like, why can't I, shadow a psychiatrist? Why can't I shadow a licensed professional counselor? It's what I want to do. I want to work in a private practice setting, right? It's glamorous. You see it on TV, or I want to work at a forensic lab. Of course, we all want to have that experience. That sounds awesome. But there's a little thing called liability insurance, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here. This is something, if you're interested in graduate school, you'll learn a lot more about. But basically, the reason being is they're medical professionals, right? Even though licensed professional counselors don't go to medical school, it's still technically considered a medical appointment. So that is the reason why you are unable to get an internship observing. And if you are getting an internship observing in this area, we'll have something to talk about, right? But that's usually a question I get right off the bat is, why can't I do this? This sounds really fun. But the good news is there are so many opportunities that give you that experience without having, to violate a HIPAA or an ethical law. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to confuse you or go into too much detail here, but that's sort of the short answer to that question that I get frequently. Another point that I have here, and I think this is especially true for psychology majors, and I regret not doing 2 internships as an undergraduate, but I think you should vary your experiences. Let's say, for example, you try case management, or you have a case management internship, right? You're working, let's say here in Guilford County, working with some community members, and you enjoy the experience, but you still are feeling slightly unsatisfied. Again, that's a good sign that maybe doing a second opportunity is right for you. Maybe you try human resources. Maybe you try a different setting or a different population that you might be interested in working with. That's okay. And again, as Robin had mentioned, you can definitely register for 2 internships, or you can do another internship on your own, right? So that is an option. That's an option for you. And the last thing I want to leave you with before I'm going to turn over to our panelists is to advocate for yourself. So we've recognized that, yes, a lot of opportunities in this field are unpaid, especially at the internship level. So this is, again, another reason why it's helpful to conduct an informational interview, to understand, what does that look like in this field? What does financial compensation look like, as a licensed professional counselor? How are you able to make money on your own, right? Without, working for a larger organization or being salaried? What does that feel like? Those are the types of questions that you're able to ask during these types of, again, if you're reaching out to somebody and doing an informational interview, can only help you in the future be your own best advocate. And then, trying to find out if the opportunity beforehand, I think, is paid or unpaid is also a great thing to do, and to check with your university, check here at Elon, right? Sometimes, that you might find a scholarship that exists. We can help you identify for specific locations, if funding might be available, if there's some type of workaround, we're happy to have those conversations with you. Even if we don't know the answer, we'll still try to help you advocate for yourself. So any questions at this point with the information? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and just double check to see, do we have all of our panelists here? I see we have Oscar, and I see both Brias. Hello, y'all. And I think Lizzie is not on yet. But this might just be a good time to check in with any questions about the content before we get started.
I had a question, Rachel, to
Sure.
follow up on the possibility of a scholarship or some funding. I know that there was some work with the Parents Council and other organizations on campus to get internship scholarships, even for places like Washington, D.C., that would help with, finding a place to live and how you're going to support yourself. Do we have that in place, or is it still just a workaround, as you call it?
Yeah, I'm going to let Robin take the answer to this one. Go ahead, Robin.
Sure. So yes and no is the answer to that. So through the SPDC, we do have a pool of funds that are earmarked to support the financial side of academic internships. So how that system works is our high need students, they are identified by the financial planning, financial aid office. Those students are notified about this opportunity for funding. And then there is an application process so that we are looking at where is the internship occurring, what type of funding, how is the student going to be using the funding. We do not put a great deal of parameters on how it's used, but it has to be used for things such as the tuition cost that's required if you're going to register an academic internship over the summer. You can use the funding for that. It can be used for housing, travel, food, that type of thing. What we don't allow you to use it for is, let's say you are going to New York City for the summer and you want to buy season tickets to, the Knicks. That's a bad example because but you get where I'm going with this. Those types of things, it would not be approved for. So it does have to go toward the professional side of your internship experience. So I say yes and no to that question because we do have a pool of funds, but it isn't necessarily open to all students at the university just yet. That is something that I think is still in great talk and consideration, is how can we expand to help remove that financial barrier that many of our students may face, and it may impact whether or not they are able to move forward with an internship. So students on the call, if any of you have questions, we have not started that process yet for this coming summer, but at any point, if you have questions about that fund, if you're wondering if it might be something that you are eligible, please feel free to reach out for me. I'll put my email address in the chat, so you'll have that. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to work one-on-one with you.
Great question. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Robin, for putting that on there. All right, well, with no further questions, we'll go ahead and get started and turn it over to our wonderful panelists. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm gonna allow them to introduce themselves and their titles for you. One of our panelists, Alyssa White, was unable to join us today as she actually, excitingly, was able to receive her first COVID vaccine. So we're gonna congratulate her for being able to do that. And she is happy to have students contact her directly. If you're interested in learning about her pathway at UNCG and her master's program, just let me know and I'm able to connect you. And then hopefully Lizzie will join us. I'll go ahead and check in. But I'm gonna turn the floor over to Bria Miller, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and introducing yourself, and just if you just want to say a few words about how you got to where you are, your current title, just who you are. Tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you all for having me here today. My name is Bria Miller. My affirming pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am the Community Engagement and Volunteer Coordinator at Crossroads Sexual Assault Response and Resource Center. I have been working there for, oh my goodness, over 2 years now, and still that is quite the mouthful for me. We are slowly trying to transition and branding ourselves more as the intersection of hope and healing, which is a bit easier to say, and I think that just flows a bit better. So I guess a little bit about how I got to where I am. All right, a lot of it actually starts with internship. So I actually went to UNC Greensboro and I studied political science and I had a concentration in pre-law. And of course, you get to your senior year and you got to do these things called internships. I had no clue what I wanted to do for an internship at the time, and I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do whenever I graduated. But I went to a networking event that was specific to our political science department. And at that networking event, I met this lady who was so passionate about her job. She was working with some things in the court systems, but also really helping people. And I was like, oh, this is appealing. Let me talk to her so I can try to get an internship. And so I was very persistent and it all worked out. I landed an internship there where I learned so much and really fell in love with the work. I had never intended to work at a nonprofit organization, but it just kind of happened that way. And so there, they actually did things with programs called Teen Court. They did juvenile work restitution program. I'm laughing and smiling because I'm seeing some familiar faces and people who know about this. Hello, Bria. Hello, Abby. I don't want to forget to call you guys out. They also did adult mediation programs, child and family team meetings. They also did this thing called Rise, where they would actually bring in students who were on probation and they would get suspended from school, but they would be able to come there to have a more structured environment. And so while I was there, it was pretty fast paced. You learn all these different things and meeting these people. Awesome. It gets close to the end of my internship and also close to time for me to graduate. And I started talking to the executive director and stuff about what I'm going to do. And then she was like, well, you know what? We have some extra money. We would like to offer you a position. And they kind of created something for me. So I became a program assistant there where I would help out with all of the different programs that they had involved. And I would also help them just keep up with some stats and things that they didn't necessarily have time to do. From there, I went on to become a program coordinator of the juvenile work restitution program. That was not my favorite, but what I did really like about it is being able to coordinate with other community institutions and stuff. So it was really cool building those different relationships with rec departments and with like thrift stores and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, community engagement stuff, that's kind of my jam. Some of this other stuff is not so much. So that's the cool stuff that you learn. But eventually I got to do what I really wanted to do, which was be the coordinator for the Teen Court program, which really ignited my passion for like restorative justice models and getting young people involved in all aspects of the process that would be impacting them. In that role also, I met someone named Courtney Dunkerton, who did work with this organization called Alamance for Freedom, and it was an anti-human trafficking coalition that tied back to work I did while at UNCG as a writing center consultant, where I actually met someone who was a survivor of human trafficking and trusted me enough to actually share her story with me. And I was like, whoa, this is really bad. Like, we need to be doing more about this, because at the time I'm a college student. I don't know, I had no clue this was even happening. But anyway, fast forward, I meet this person and we decide that it would be a really good opportunity for us to have Courtney to come and talk to our parents, talk to our young people about human trafficking so that we could spread awareness. And also, just in case there are any kids who are either at risk, higher risk, if they had already been groomed or anything, they would be hooked up to that connection. From there, Courtney and I had conversations about some of the gaps we were seeing. And what we did not see was a safe space. And I use that term in quotations because that's kind of an iffy term right now. But for those young people, and specifically teenage girls who didn't always feel accepted by certain groups. And so we wrote a grant together and got money to start a mentoring group. Eventually, I ended up leaving dispute settlement, also because like that organization ended up dissolving, and I went to work for Alamance for Freedom full time, where I became a victim advocate in the human trafficking program and also the director of youth services there. Eventually, a couple years later, we ended up merging with Crossroads Sexual Assault Response and Resource Center, where I was still able to keep the same job as being an advocate in the human trafficking program. As you can imagine, it's really good work, very rewarding work, also really tiring, exhausting. And I got to the point where it's like, okay, I think it's time for me to shift gears. And an opportunity opened up for me to do more of the things that I really love, which is connecting with community, educating the community, connecting with volunteers and interns and things. And so here I am today. I apologize because that was a long story, but I think it's a pretty interesting one and one that's very fitting for today.
Absolutely. No apology necessary. Thank you, Bria. And I think it's a true testament too to just connection, right? And even just her saying hello to Bria and Abby on the call, right? Like, who knew? It's a small world. But I think kind of exploring or just going or trusting your gut, I think that's just a true testament to, you know, taking a chance and seeing where it leads, right? Even if you don't like it, but often you'll find that it is rewarding. So I'll go ahead and allow Lizzie to have the floor.
Hello, I'm sorry I was running a little behind. We had another recruiting event right before this, and I feel like I've just been on Zoom all day. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you again for having me. Rachel, could you remind me?
Yes, yeah. So just a bit of an overview of who you are and how you got to your current role or position.
Gotcha. So my name is Lizzie Tasuda. I am the director of Campus Greensboro, which is an initiative of Action Greensboro. Action Greensboro is a talent development, workforce development nonprofit tied to the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce. So lots of dotted lines there. Campus Greensboro is focused on retaining college students in our city post-graduation. So hopefully, maybe you guys have heard of us. We have a great relationship with Elon. We have a lot of Elon students in our programs. So I'm especially excited to talk to you all today. A little bit about my background. So I have a psychology background. So I'm from Oklahoma, moved here 5 years ago, actually this month, which I cannot believe it. But I went to the University of Oklahoma and I got my bachelor's in psychology there and loved it. I did a lot of internships, but as I tell students all the time, I never had a paid internship. And sometimes I think in psychology, especially, that's really difficult to find. And I know how difficult it is firsthand to balance unpaid experience while also trying to manage your bills and your other, financial obligations. So I'm very passionate about paid internships in particular, and that all fields should find a way to do that. So while I was fortunate to have unpaid internships that did shape my future, I think that, again, it's difficult. You get very stretched thin when you're trying to work full-time or part-time jobs, full-time internship, and then classes on top of that, as I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to. So I then went on to get my master's in multicultural counseling, which was a wonderful master's program. I worked in several clinics, again, all unpaid, but I worked in a lot of clinics, and I wanted to work with young adults in higher education, but also adolescents and high school age. And so really that's where my focus was and where I practiced. I then went on to look at getting my PhD in counseling. And in that role, I actually got into a graduate assistantship with career services, which is funny because I always kind of thought career counseling was boring. Sorry to y'all in career counseling. I am now in career counseling. I feel like I can say that. But when I think about the classes that I took in that area, I was like, oh, that's not nearly as fun as diagnostics and assessment and some of the other things that we were doing. Just felt dry to me. And so I wasn't thrilled about getting a graduate assistantship in career services. I wanted other departments, but I took what I can get because I needed that support. I ended up loving it. And it really shaped exactly what I wanted to do. And so I ended up taking a job full-time in career services because of that, and worked in career development for a couple different universities before moving to Greensboro, and then took a role with Action Greensboro in the nonprofit world, which again, I never thought that I would explore the nonprofit work, but it tied in so well with my counseling background. I work a lot with one-on-one with students. I work one-on-one with employers. And I don't do counseling sessions per se, but I do counseling for sessions per se at the same time. You know how that can work. And so I love being able to make a difference kind of in a broader sense in our community, while still being able to practice the skills I learned in my psychology and counseling roles. So my internship certainly shaped knowing what populations I wanted to work with, thinking about adolescents and higher education and college student populations. And then my graduate assistantship really is what kind of opened the doors for me. And again, that was an assistantship that I wasn't thrilled about initially, and I'm so glad that worked out that way. So that's a little bit about my background.
Thanks, Lizzie, and I appreciate the honesty. It's good to be honest and vulnerable and authentic. And it's important to hear, I think, too, how those experiences shape us. Bria Williams, would you mind going next?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Bria Williams. I'm a 2016 graduate of Elon University. I I graduated with my degree in psychology, and I had my minor in human service studies, excuse me. And so I'm trying to think, there's so much that's happened since then. So whenever I was actually at Elon, I was able to intern because of my human service studies placement. So I actually got placed at dispute settlement, where Bria Miller was as well. And I think you were getting your master's degree at the same time, right, Bria? No, it was undergrad as well? Oh, okay, undergrad too. So we were both interning at the same time. And that experience really shaped me as well. I thought that I did want to work with youth and counseling, and I'll kind of tell you about how that kind of changed up along the way. But after dispute settlement, I was able to actually get a internship with a psychiatrist, which, because of HIPAA rules and violations, that was actually really big for me to get and be able to experience and have that opportunity. And that was really great. After that, I decided that I wanted to go pursue straight to a PhD in counseling. And quite funny, I got denied from all 3 programs, which I was very shocked about. However, it became the biggest blessing for me personally. So when I graduated, I was looking for a job. I want to share that sometimes you don't find a job automatically. You don't find it right after you graduate. That's really important. It doesn't always work out that way. So I was able to get a job with Alamance County Community Services Agency, which is a nonprofit in Burlington. And ultimately, it helps low-income individuals become self-sufficient and find housing, schooling, anything, job placement, all of that. And so it was very difficult being a 22-year-old and working with adults and helping them shape their lives when honestly I hadn't really figured out mine yet. And so in that process, what I learned was that a lot of adults had an issue with their job. So with management, with getting paid accordingly, policies and procedures. And so I really kind of questioned, what my purpose was and how I could help. And it didn't happen to be in that area. So I ended up going back and getting my MBA in human resources. Wow, concentrating that in that field. And so while I was getting my MBA and concentrating in human resources, I started to intern. And so I interned with a company called Carolina Sunrock. That's in Butner, North Carolina. And I was able to get a lot of hands-on experience with recruiting and just other human resource generalist roles and responsibilities. And then from there, I was able to land an internship with a Fortune 500 company called ABB, which is in the tech engineering space. And that's actually where I work now. So with ABB, I've had the opportunity to come in as a human resources business partner, which ultimately is helping align the business goals with workforce planning and recruitment and things like that, talent acquisition, employee engagement. And so from that internship, I got pulled on full time after I graduated with my MBA into a HR project management role. In that role, I've gotten to help a lot with cultural change, which has been a really awesome project. So I've worked with 6 different facilities and changing how they view their culture, because I was dealing with an acquisition and having to change everyone over to the same culture, which was really difficult, but also a really great project to have. And then since I've been with ABB, so I started May 2019 as an intern, came on full-time December 2019, and then in November 2020, I became a full-time HR business partner. And so ultimately that means that kind of the same thing that I was doing before as an intern when I started, and just helping the business figure out how to put their people in the right places to reach the business goals, and how I can make strategic planning and help the business with any needs that they have. So that's a quick overview of how I got to where I am now from Elon, and it's been a great experience. Elon definitely shaped a lot of that for me.
Thank you so much, Bria. We're excited you're here today, and I'm curious to hear more. And last but not least, Oscar.
Hi, everyone. My name is Oscar Miranda. I'm an assistant director here in the Center for Access and Success at Elon University, Mooney 3rd floor, for those of you who may not know. So how did I get to this role? Honestly, I feel like my career path has taken me through a lot of, twists and turns. And so I think in order for this to make sense, I'm going to bring it back to when I first arrived at Elon, thinking that I was actually going to be a business management major. Long story short, took that first class, Econ 111, and didn't do so hot. I, felt like maybe this wasn't for me. So left that, but that first semester, or that first summer, I had the opportunity to do like a business internship. And so that experience in itself really confirmed that like, this is not like my path. And I started that sophomore fall, thinking that maybe, I could do like psychology. So took a psychology class. I did pretty good. I started taking another one and so forth. At this point, I haven't like fully declared. And then I go and talk to a professor who's no longer there now. And I go in there and I ask, well, what kinds of stuff could I do with like a psychology degree? And he told me how, one thing that you're probably going to have to consider, or maybe he said it more like just head on. And he was all like, you're probably going to have to get a master's degree. And I was all like, oh, are you sure? Like, because that's not what I'm signing up for. Like, I don't want to keep going back to school. And he immediately did turn me away from psychology. I left that, and started looking into like other internships, started bouncing around, took exercise science, intro to exercise science, some biology classes, thinking I was going to be a bio major. Eventually, one day I thought to myself, like, thinking in the shower, like, oh, it'd be really cool, like if I took like an education class. And so I went back to my advisor, said, hey, how can I get into education class? By this point, it's like my junior year, and I still have not declared a major. I have not chosen anything except I take this class in education. And then I think, okay, well, how can I get into the education space? I start talking to some people thinking that maybe I could do a master's in arts and teaching and then get into maybe teaching science and stuff. Long story short, that doesn't work out because Elon then comes back and tells me, hey, we noticed that you haven't chosen a major. And if you're gonna graduate in 4 years, you need to have, chosen a major. And so they said, you have 4 options. Actually, you have 3 options for a major if you want to graduate out of here in 4 years. And so I was on scholarship, so I couldn't afford, another semester at Elon. And so the options were applied math, pure math, and psychology. And so it was very clear to me what my major was going to be. And I had also taken some psychology classes, so decided to stick with it. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And something that is, I think, that helped shape my experience in getting into this education space, working at Elon, was a lot of the experiences that I was having outside of the classroom. So I talked about my internship in the business company, but it wasn't, it wasn't my flow. Something else I was doing during my time at Elon was working with the Elon Academy. For those of you who don't know, it's a college access program at Elon helping high school students get into college. And so I was working with this program, worked with them for, over 3 years. And started doing this kind of work. I myself was a first generation college student. Getting into college was a big deal for me and my family. And so I felt like it was a niche for me to be able to give back to other high school students that had similar backgrounds like myself. Anyways, progressed throughout Elon. Like I said, I eventually got to my junior year, had to declare, find something. Actually take a little step back. Along the way too, I mentioned that I was on scholarship. So I was an Odyssey scholar, and part of my requirement for being in the program is meeting with my advisor, my scholarship advisor. And in my sophomore year, she said, hey, have you ever considered applying to this executive internship program? And so I hadn't never considered it. I didn't even know what it was. I was all but it sounds cool, executive, it sounds like that could be, kind of interesting. And so looked into it. I started applying. Long story short, got the internship that sophomore year, started the internship my junior year. And essentially what it is, for those of you who don't know, it's the opportunity to work alongside a senior staff member at Elon, think vice president or so, and work behind the scenes on some kind of university strategic plan project. And so you really get to be in these spaces where not a lot of students are, think board of trustees, decisions being made. I remember being in meetings when the whole emblem with the leaf and the flame, the rebranding stuff before Elon became the emblem that it is now. I was in those meetings, and it was just so cool to have been in those spaces and see how a university is run, in the things you don't see. So had that experience. And then at some point in my junior year, I wanted to do study abroad. So one of the things that I was looking at was the Study USA program in New York City. At this point, I'm starting to kind of get a drift. I loved education. That education class kind of propelled me into thinking potentially education. So I started doing some internships in other colleges. While in New York City, I did 2 internships because it's required as part of the program. One was at Marymount Manhattan College, where I worked with other students like Odyssey that may be the first in the families to attend college, and also may come from lower income households. And so I work with them, and I can talk more about that connection and how I got there later on. But Something else I also worked with was this college access program at Princeton University. And so I was also connected through that through like the Elon Academy network that they have. And eventually I stayed really close contact with my my advisors, my mentors, and they were honestly the ones that were kind of like guiding me to like opportunities that they thought I would be a good fit for. Something that was coming up my junior year was the development of a community impact fellowship that exists, which is an opportunity for students, graduate students at Elon, to work with nonprofits in Alamance County. And so I got tapped for this position by my mentor. And by the time I was finished my junior year, I had already had this fellowship secured for after I graduated. And so I was all like, all right, cool. Like, you know, now I can just live my senior year peacefully. And it sounds like this fellowship could be of interest to me. Throughout this time, I've been working with nonprofits like the Elon Academy, like the College Access Program, and even in other colleges. And so I thought it would be a good fit. And again, fast forward to this Community Impact Fellowship, and it wasn't the greatest experience, but it taught me a lot. And again, I connected with my scholarship advisor, who was all like, you know, have you ever considered getting like a master's degree in higher education? And I was all like, no, I felt like education, you know, I never saw myself like living in the education space, but look at me, like obviously my work and my resume says otherwise. And so you know, she said, you know, you should consider applying. And I was like, all right, I'll apply. She said, have you ever considered applying to Harvard? And I was all like, no, definitely not. She eventually motivated me to do it. I applied, got in, I got my master's in higher education, and I stayed connected with her again throughout this whole process. And an opportunity opened up at Elon to be, you know, working with first generation college students. And so I applied, got it, and now I'm here. I started this job in 2019, fall 2019. And so it hasn't been too long, but I never expected to be in this space. I kind of fell on it by accident. Never thought higher education was like a career path that you could take on. But, you know, definitely happy. And it's all thanks to the different connections that I had throughout my undergraduate experience and the people that, you know, believed in me before I could believe in myself.
Thanks so much, Oscar. And I appreciate the relatability there too, with just trying so many different things out. I was like that too as an undergraduate student, so I can appreciate. And you've all kind of spoken, so our panelists have all spoken a little bit about my next question for them, which was tell us more about the value of an internship. So you've already kind of stolen that thunder. But do any of you have a little bit more that you can add to that sentiment? I mean, it sounds like the internship component for all of you, whether it was in undergraduate or, you know, in your graduate program, was the thing or the tipping point that was the most valuable, or up there with the top most valuable things. But does anybody else have anything to add to that?
I think one thing I'll say just quickly, and I mentioned this kind of with my graduate assistantship, but I think this is super relevant to internships too. You know, I mentioned how I thought when I was taking career counseling classes, they weren't my cup of tea, but when I actually got into it and did it and had more experience seeing it in the field, how it became something that I loved. And I think that happens a lot with internships. And so sometimes I think that students will limit themselves to their favorite classes and only look at internships in maybe those areas. And while, yeah, that should definitely be a good starting point, thinking beyond that and doing some informational interviews with employers to learn more about what the actual experience would be outside of the classroom, I think is a great way to learn more about it and really take a chance on internships that maybe you wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think in addition to that, it also is great to intern so that you become on the company's radar, right? So you can be an early career talent that the company is looking forward to hiring after you graduate, which is ultimately the goal of interning, so that you can work full time at a company and, you know, get paid for what you went to school to study for. So that's another benefit as well.
Yeah, and I would also add that it's a really good opportunity to get an insider's view from like the outside. So interning tends to be a shorter term commitment than just going ahead and working somewhere. So you get to really see like kind of the ins and outs of the work. You get to see the culture, you get to see aspects of the job you like, but also aspects of like relationship dynamics and things that you may want to have and things that you may not want to have. So I would say that's another big perk with internships.
Something else I'll add here is definitely what Bria was saying about like the inside, the culture, but also something that came to my mind was thinking about whether or not you see yourself maybe in that city or that particular location. Having those internships, for example, in New York, I asked myself, you know, is this the life that I want to like live, where, you know, I'm using public transportation in the morning, going to the city, leaving work? Like, does this restore me, right? Like, this is what my time off is going to look like after I leave work. Is this place for me? Is this life for me? So something else to
Totally. All extremely valid points, I think. So thank you. So the next question I had, and I'd appreciate for, you know, so, and also for some context too on our panelists. So Bria Miller and Lizzie Tessuto also, they supervise students or have supervised interns or volunteers in the past. So I'm curious about their perspective from that lens, as well as themselves from being an intern. And for all of us on the call, what do we think are some of the barriers to getting an internship, or to, you know, to sustaining an internship? I mean, financial, we've talked a little bit about that earlier on in the session, scholarships and advocating for yourself. But I'm just curious, like, what have been some barriers that you've, you know, perceived both with working with, you know, supervising, as well as from the experience of having an internship? And Bria Miller, I'll toss it over to you.
Okay, I'll keep it brief. One thing that I do think is a barrier is kind of like the lack of network or the confidence to tap into networks. I think that's something that some folks take for granted, the fact that like they've already created the relationships with the professors or with the counselors who connected them to these other folks, but that's not true for all students. Especially if you want to intern somewhere that's not necessarily traditional for the route you're taking with your particular major. I would say that if that is your situation, I would just encourage you to really be proactive and to know that like whenever you're seeking out an internship, it's very valuable to them to know that you went ahead and you took that initiative yourself to reach out. You don't necessarily have to be connected by someone else. So that is something that we definitely look for. That's a great thing. It's like, okay, this person sees the things that they want. They can take that initiative. That'll be awesome for what they can do as far as work goes for our particular organization or company. Another one I would say is like food, which is something that I think we also take for granted. So sometimes whenever we're going to places for internships, I don't think a lot of students, I don't think I would have thought about this either. But think about the fact that like, if you're there for a long period of time, you're gonna need to eat. And I remember being a college student and I didn't always have money to like necessarily eat out, or like you're not always going to go to the grocery store because usually you have like a little mini fridge and you don't necessarily have things to prepare. So that can also be a barrier if you felt comfortable. Sometimes that's a good thing, good conversation to even have with your actual internship to see if there's something else that is available. I know for some places, like they'll have food that is there on site, or there are things like in surrounding areas, or you can make a plan and maybe it is that you're able to take longer than like a 30-minute break so that you can go to campus and get food or like whatever that is. So those are just a couple of things.
Absolutely. Lucy?
So I like what Bria said about confidence to network. I think confidence in general can be a barrier for students when they're applying to internships. the thing about internships is that they don't always ask that you already have experience. This is your time to get experience. And so many students I talk to are nervous about that. They look at the job description and they're like, if they don't check 100% of the boxes, they're not going to apply. And no one checks 100% of the boxes. You're not expected to have everything lined out. And so, if you have any type of relevant experience, if you feel like you can sell yourself and you can be confident in your current experience, you have a good shot. So I think that imposter syndrome is real. I think we feel that as students, but we also feel that as young professionals, as seasoned professionals, as people in general. And I think that can be a big barrier. And I hope that you all can feel confident in your next internship search to know that you do have the skills necessary to be successful.
Imposter syndrome is so real. Bria Williams.
I think that they covered them all that I was going to cover, so I'm good.
One thing I'll just add here, for me personally, none of these internships that I ever received, besides the first one in business, was paid. And so, for those of you who that may be like a big challenge, the financial piece, definitely, especially at Elon, I have found that you have to talk to a lot of people, put yourself in those spaces, because there are pockets of money, but it's all about who has access to them or who knows about them. And so, talk to people and let them know, what are some of your concerns, and you never know who they may be able to point you to. It was through the connecting with my advisor that I connected with the GEC about the study abroad and financial concerns that I had, who then connected me to the financial aid office, who then practically paid everything for me, not just the trip, but also gave me like a living stipend to live in New York. And I, at that point, just budgeted my money very well, and was able to leave New York with some of that money in my pocket. And, if that's not an option, I would encourage you all to check out other departments across campus. And looking at people like departments' websites, I know that the Koenigsberger Learning Center has a grant that you can tap into to be able to complete one of the 5 Elon experiences, internships being one of those. Another department that has funds is the Kernodle Learning Center. And so tap into those different small grants, because they could really add up and could make the difference between, you accepting, being able to accept that internship financially.
Thanks so much, Oscar. And one thing I'll add too, one of the resources that I shared earlier, the What Can I Do with This Major, when you're looking at professional associations websites like the APA, for example, the American Psychological Association, they often have scholarship or grant information on those websites as well for certain internships or research opportunities. So it's worth exploring in any capacity. And so I'm going to turn it over to Robin to finalize some of our questions for our panelists.
Great, thanks, Rachel. So one question that we often get through the SPDC when we're meeting with students, and we would love our panelists' feedback on this, is how, as a student candidate, do I make myself stand out on a resume or my internship application because I'm one of however many? And so what are some tips that you may have from your own experiences or from being a supervisor where perhaps you've been reviewing applications? What tips would you offer our students? And Bria Williams, I'll start with you because you're the top person on my screen right now.
I was really thinking about that, so I may have to think through that a little bit more, but just from some tips and tricks that I've been told is to make sure that there's white space on your resume, right? So your resume should be 1 page. You don't have that much experience, so don't try to fill it up because we understand that you don't have experience. Also, keep your resume concise. So a recruiter is probably looking at your resume for about 30 seconds. So put as much as you can on your resume that will attract them by ultimately looking at the job description and pulling keywords from that job description that may show that you were actually reading it and tailoring your resume to their job specifically or their internship specifically. Putting your education at the top is really important. I actually have some tips that I can send you, Rachel, that I actually did come across, and that may help as well. But that's
Perfect.
all I have right now.
That's great. Thank you. Any of our other panelists? I'm trying to be aware of the time, and we've got some really
Yes.
questions left. So I don't want to, I'm trying to balance all of it.
One thing I would love to add just quickly, I know we're short on
Please.
time, but
No, go
is
right ahead.
around transferable skills. And you all probably have talked about that and you may know about this, but you may not have direct relevant experience. Most students don't, but you do have experience. So how you frame that experience and how you make it relevant is super important. Quick, very short story, I promise. One student I worked with a long time ago, his name was Josh, and he was a graduating senior, and he on his resume was about a quarter page long. He was very stressed out about it. He essentially had gone to school and he worked at Subway 35 hours a week and didn't have time to do anything outside of that. And so, I looked at his resume, and the only bullet point he had on his resume under Subway was that he made sandwiches. And I was like, do you want to make sandwiches for the rest of your life? And he was like, well, no, that's why I'm looking for something else. And I was like, but that's all I know about you, right? If I'm just looking at that. And so we started diving into all the experience that he'd had within that. And because he'd worked there for 4 years and he was training new employees, he was really great at conflict resolution with unhappy customers. He was entrusted with opening and closing the store. He had a lot of really great skills that translated and transferred really well to next experiences, but it was just how he framed it. And that landed him an internship, is just going through that process. And so thinking about your experiences differently, not necessarily the tasks that you do, like make sandwiches, but the skills that you're using that show that you do that effectively.
That is great, Lizzie. Yes, that is something that you can apply to your internship as well as graduate school, full-time work. It really is about those transferable skills. So I'm probably going to make this the last question for our panelists so that we've got time if there are any student questions or anything. But as we know, we are still in this world of COVID, and as we are continuing to navigate it and move, a little bit further down the road with some things, it's still something that we have to keep in mind as students are exploring internships. So do you have any advice on things students should be keeping in mind as they are exploring internships during COVID? Because that has significantly impacted a lot of pieces of the search, as well as the selection and hiring process and onboarding. So what would you give some advice to our students around that area? And Bria Miller, you are now the top person on my screen, so we'll start with you.
Thanks. A couple of things that come to mind. One is to be very open to the different possibilities within your internship experience, and knowing that things may not necessarily look the same, but you can still have a really good quality internship. An example of this would be, we had a couple of folks to complete their practicum with us. And in that experience, one of them did not want to come on site at all, just didn't feel comfortable because of COVID restrictions. Great. That's totally fine. And what she was able to do instead was to Zoom in to some meetings and things and get experience that way, and was also able to help us to develop some things for our crisis line, and to look at manuals and those kinds of things. So it was a different experience, but because that person was open, we were able to explore those different avenues. And that student actually said, wow, this was super fulfilling. I learned things that I did not expect to learn, but really enjoyed this. Also, I would say, and it kind of goes back to what I was just stating, be honest with yourself and honest with the place where you are looking to intern about what it is that they are doing, what precautions they are taking, but also your comfort level and what it is that you're willing to do in your experience. And just keep that in mind. It's always important to make sure that you're safe and you feel safe, because if you do, you will have a much better experience overall.
Lizzie, Bria, or Oscar, any other pieces you would like to add in?
I'll jump in really quickly, just because I saw so many virtual internships happening over the summer through Campus Greensboro, and we're continuing to see that trend. And I had a virtual intern for the first time this fall. And so I think anytime we think about virtual communication, it's about being more intentional. So you have to intentionally reach out. So whether you are in the internship search, you have to be a lot more intentional. You can't just rely on bumping into someone at a networking event or, making small talk or having that connection. You have to reach out and be more intentional about that connection. If you are in an internship, you have to be really intentional about communicating your needs and helping the employer navigate how to manage you. So many employers are struggling to manage their own teams and staffs virtually. They're not used to that. And then to add an intern without any experience on top of that is a little overwhelming for them. So if you can be really communicative and intentional to tell them, I need, weekly 30-minute catch-ups. I need to know the best way to connect with you if I have a question. I need to know, how should I showcase my workflow and what I've been doing throughout the week. And so, hopefully by this summer, we'll either be a lot in person or at least virtually, we'll have more experience on how to handle virtual work. But in summer 2020, we saw a lot of that, knowing that, it was the first time a lot of people pivoted to that world.
I would just add one last thing to kind of piggyback off of what Lizzie said. So networking, you really use LinkedIn. That's a really great networking tool. If you don't know what that is, I'm sure Career Services can help you start and build your LinkedIn. That's actually how I got mine started when I was at Elon. And also not just talking about what you need from your hiring manager, but also talking about what you want to learn and what you want to get out of that internship, because they often don't know that. So if you have something specifically that you want to learn, let them know, especially in this environment.
That's great. I think what each of you has just hit on is that piece that we were mentioning earlier about being your own advocate and really helping to express what you need. And I say that because I also appreciate that as a college student, trying to figure out how to do that is extremely scary and overwhelming. And if I had been in your shoes and someone said, well, just reach out and tell them what you need, I would have thought, well, I'm going to look bad and it's going to reflect poorly on me. So know that one, it won't, and two, that the career team, we are here to help you craft those messages. We can help you think through what does that look like? Because yes, you do have to balance that where you are advocating for yourself, but also showing that you understand and respect the limitations of the situation and that employer as well. So I don't want to speak for the faculty on the call, but I'm sure your faculty members would be happy to help craft that as well. I wanted, and Oscar, did you have anything? I don't want to leave you out. You're not on my immediate screen, but you are still a big piece of this program.
I was just going to say, like, going back to the earlier question about like needing to stand out, really use your network. Elon has, a database of professionals that, maybe some of them are working at the job or the company that you want to work with. Reach out to them, connect with them, ask them about that position or whether or not that company is hiring. You never know what might come up before it actually becomes live. And make yourself like really stand out by always like being there. So ask to speak to the supervisor about the position. Try to get in spaces that maybe just filling out an application just wouldn't get you that. You almost have to network to the point where you don't have to rely on your own application. Follow up. Once you've submitted that application, follow up, see like, hey, where are we in this process? One of my graduate assistantship that I ever had, which is like an internship, they said that they more than likely gave me the position because I was so consistently reaching back out to them about like, hey, where are we in this process? And it just showed a different level of like commitment and this desire to really have this position. And so they could see that through my just persistence.
Yeah, I think that's huge. One of my biggest sayings during COVID for students is, and I mean, this is in general, shouldn't end with COVID, but be proactive, not reactive. So don't wait for that. Like, try to be the person. And this is why I also showed you how to do a county-based search, looking at the department's website to see what county resources are available. Explore organizations that way, right? And then reach out, even if they don't have something posted. So I want to be mindful of our panelists' time. Students, if there's one burning question that you all have or would like to ask any of our panelists, please go ahead and do so now.
I have a question. Oscar, I know that you just spoke about being persistent in reaching out to those companies. I have a friend who's currently looking for an internship, and on a lot of the applications that she filled out, at the end of them, it says please don't reach out after you submit it. Is that something that's seen on all of them, and that it's okay to ignore that, or they really don't want you to reach out?
Great question. And I'll answer it briefly in what I think you should do, but I definitely want to tap into Robin's expertise here. So if they say don't contact them, then definitely don't contact them. You want to make some of the things that they'll post on job descriptions are very intentional because they want to make sure that applicants are paying attention to that detail. And so don't, if there's something that's specified on that application, definitely follow it. But, I'll turn it over to either Rachel or Robin to expand.
I 100% agree with everything. Definitely follow what's listed. Same thing with the question where they may say, please submit, or the statement where they say, please submit your resume, a cover letter, and 3 references. Just submit that material. Don't send 5 references. Don't send 1 reference. Send 3 references, because part of it is they are looking to see, are you following those instructions? If you are just dying to know where things stand with that process, there are possibilities where myself, Rachel, someone from our career team, we may be able to connect with that company from the perspective of saying, well, hi, I work in the Career Development Center at Elon University. I saw that you had this posting. I'm just curious to see if you are still accepting applications. I think it'd be great for our students. So we can kind of massage that connection and that conversation where it doesn't jeopardize anybody's candidacy in that way. That's also, Bria Williams was just talking earlier about LinkedIn. That's a wonderful way to use your Elon network. See if we have an Elon connection at that company. Build a relationship with that alum who can kind of help give you some inside scoop on where things are with that particular posting. But Rachel, I don't want to cut you off.
And Bria Williams, I'm curious too, from the HR perspective, if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I was just going to say definitely use LinkedIn. You could reach out to a recruiter on there, right? And just say, hey, I'm really interested in this position. Just kind of wanted to get some feedback on how it goes. Can you give me some an inside scoop, on the position specifically? Or find an intern that interned at that company in the past, and you could reach out to them. They may have a network within the company that can help, get you passed along in the process. Networking is really big. It's how I got to ABB. And it's actually how I continue to grow at ABB. So please use your network, specifically LinkedIn. It will take you very far.
Awesome. Thank you all. All right, y'all. So I do want to be mindful and respectful of our time. We're a few minutes over. So let us just give a virtual round of applause to our panelists today. Thank you all so much for being part of this conversation. I really appreciate it. I hope our students appreciate it as well. And please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Robin. And if any of the panelists, I think you all are okay with your contact information being shared. If a student has a question, we will be happy to pass that along. So thanks y'all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone. All right. Thanks,
Thank
y'all.
you. We'll see you later. I just want to say
Take
thanks.
care.